Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 461. Freddie E. Williams II comes back to join us in our 10th anniversary. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the Whatnot Segulin, the Duke of You Know, and the elder statesman of the podcast.
How's it going, eh?
On this episode, we're going to be joined by Freddie E. Williams II as we talk about Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We're going very spoilery on issue number 4, and also talking about just kind of the build-up to issue 4 and why we love that series so much. And always Freddie's insight is tremendous into the artwork and his philosophy. I'm just really excited to have Freddie back on the show. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network, the League of Comic Book Podcasts, and the InfiniteComics.com podcast partnership. Jim, we are sponsored this episode, as always, by DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Jim, can you tell me what is going on at DCBService.com?
Well, of course, they always have the great bundles that you know I love, and they're continuing the Vertigo support, 50% off all 12 titles, only $23.88. But the big news is this, issue 6, the last issue of the great crossover event of the year. I am, of course, talking about Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Issue number 6, it's 40% off, only $2.39. Check this out. This is an awesome story.
Yeah, I'm over at InStockTrades.com, and one of the things we never talk about is the fact that there is a search engine there. And you can search for creators, and, you know, with Freddie being on the show, I'm like, let's search through there and just start seeing some of the work that, and it pops up right away. You'll see work like Brain Boy that he's done over at Dark Horse, work he's done on Dark Horse Presents, these pop up in trade paperbacks, the work on DC on the Movement. So I encourage you to do that when you've got favorite creators, and somebody, you know, on this episode, Freddie's going to talk about some of his work before he did Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I always love the fact that when I get to know a creator for the first time in a project, there's a chance to go back through and really see what other work that they've done and get to enjoy that for myself. So I encourage you to do that over at InStockTrades.com. Do a search for Freddie's work and check out some of the work that you may have missed in the past from Freddie E. Williams II. We want to thank DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com for continuing to support our show. Mr. Segulin, what kind of a podcast are we?
Cowabunga! Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Without further ado, let's welcome back Freddie.
A scarlet costume ejects from his ring, and in a blur of motion, police scientist Barry Allen becomes the Flash.
Joining us once again, and actually this is really appropriate because this month we're celebrating 10 years of Raging Bullets. If there is a guest who just has been such a big part of the show, it's Freddie E. Williams II. And we're really proud to have you back on the show to talk about, obviously, your work on Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but also to thank you for just your years of supporting the show because you've been such a great contributor to our podcast. So it's really with great pleasure that we have you back on the podcast.
Oh, cool. Yeah, thank you for having me on. And it's been it is a pleasure to hang out with you guys in a virtual sense, and it's my pleasure.
Welcome back to the Raging Bullets podcast. Welcome back. I'm not going to sing the whole song.
That was beautiful.
Well, thank you. My voice started cracking halfway through, like, oh, God, this is not going to be good.
My ears started cracking at the beginning.
That was great. I thought maybe you guys had flown in a professional lounge singer. It was powerful.
I'm trying to fly him out to a lounge. You keep encouraging him. That's part of the
I know.
Come back to every episode. We have Freddie on. It's like, that was great. No.
He only has to put up with me with the one episode. He knows you got to keep going over and over and over again.
You know what? This is punishment for all the hours we put him through.
Ha-ha.
You know, honestly, talking about Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it's one of the joys of getting to know you and your artwork and and some of your interests, because it's one of the great things with you. I've always complimented you on it, and I genuinely mean this as a fan. Your presence on social media is terrific. You really do a great fan outreach. You're easy to find on Twitter, Facebook, your own website. Your artwork is spread throughout. When you're in the middle of drawing, whether it's concept drawings or commissions that you're doing or covers that you're working on, you take us through a process, which is real interesting, but we also get to know some of your interests. I've known for years your interest in like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle franchise. I remember when we've had you on previously, you were geeking out over covers you were doing. Did you ever see the day where you would have these two together, like Batman and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles together in like a big book like this?
Oh, not at all. Of course not. I mean, I don't think anybody really, I never saw this book becoming a reality, no matter who had drawn it, or I shouldn't say that I never saw that happening, but it's like, the vast majority of my life, it just wouldn't have been a possibility in my mind. So my involvement with it was because back in late 2012, my exclusive with DC had expired. I'd been in an exclusive with them for like 6 years. And so I had made this list of all these different intellectual properties that I wanted to work on, and Ninja Turtles was at the very top of the list. I mean, the list is pretty long, but Ninja Turtles was very much at the top. So I had done actually just one single cover for them, which was issue 24. It was right when the IDW series was going into the City Fall storyline. The IDW Ninja Turtle series is very good. I recommend everyone read it. But in any case, I was very excited to do that, and it was like very much like a lifelong dream come true, but it didn't really like quench my thirst. It just kind of teased it or made me want to draw more of it. And anyway, I kept pestering Bobby, the editor for the Ninja Turtles, and I mean pestering him. And I don't necessarily encourage people to pester Bobby, but it was like I would email him basically once a month and just see if there was any more covers I could do, or if there was a series type, like a story arc or a mini series or, an annual or just something that I could be involved with. And he had told me kind of casually or in passing in 2013 that there were some talks with DC that they might have some crossovers, and that he thought I would be a great fit for that. But, he didn't even mention Batman, and it was like really far away as far as a certainty. And that sort of stuff falls apart all the time in the comic book industry. It's just this cool thing that almost happened, and then something fell through because of the parent companies or someone's schedule or just whatever. Or if a movie had done really badly, or just something where, like, let's say the 2013 Ninja Turtles movie, was that 13 or 14? I think it was 2014. Mm-hmm. If that movie had just done so badly that the property seemed poisonous suddenly, or just stuff like that can kill something that's in production. Anyway, it like almost 2 years, I would occasionally talk to Bobby, and just nothing was really developing as far as like an opportunity for me to work on a Ninja Turtles product, or that the crossover didn't seem to be making headway. Then one day I saw a tweet from Jim Chadwick, who is now my editor on this book, but he had tweeted that the Star Trek Green Lantern crossover, he was announcing it, or he was commenting on it, or he had retweeted it or something. And that made me think, oh, sweet. That means that if this crossover worked out, maybe the gears are moving in a good way for a possible Ninja Turtle DC crossover. I shot Jim Chadwick and Bobby an email just reminding them, essentially just taking a stab in the dark, that if they ever did a Ninja Turtle DC crossover, to please keep me in mind, that it would be a dream project for me. And I had linked some Ninja Turtle artwork that I'd done and a Conan short story that I did, because it was in the same sort of rendering style, this ink wash sort of very detailed rendering style. I linked those things to say this is kind of what it would look like. Within like a week or something, Jim wrote me back and said, holy crap, you must have been psychic, because we were talking about it that day. They were going over artists at that time that might possibly work for this crossover. And I don't know if I was even, I don't know if I was one of the people they were considering or not, or if I just happened to email them and they were like, he's not on the list, but look at these samples and that will be something interesting to try. I really don't know, but that is probably the best sort of accidental timing I've ever had in my life. This would have been in like late April. That's basically how I got connected to the project. And I come from such a pessimistic family. Like, if you had ever met my mom when we were growing up, she was always like the kind of person that if you had good news, she would always be like, yeah, but just wait for that other shoe to drop, or, something like that. And that's just my inner monologue now. And so I kept expecting for something to fall apart on it, like where a couple months would go by and then they would say the project, because it hadn't been announced yet, it was just more like that is a project we want to do and we'd like to have you on board. And I just expected something to fall apart where they would go with a different artist or whatever. They had me do a couple of pieces for promotion, and then when San Diego came around, it got announced. And I'm kind of rambling, but it's because it's weird for me to think that this is a reality and that I'm getting to draw this and like it's a real thing. It's it's very weird.
No, it's actually incredibly interesting to me to see the genesis of this, because I think one of the things that has been really terrific now is when I grew up, like crossovers were hit or miss. When you would have characters from different companies crossover and such, some of those were really good, but others, sometimes they were one-shot flash in the pans where you didn't have the story depth that you really wanted, where the characters really got to know each other and really got to embrace not only the similarities, but the differences between the different franchises, villain team-ups and things like that. Other ones were complete hits where it was like, oh my gosh, this has been a dream. I've always wanted to see this, and they nailed it. Now, the consistency, especially when you're talking about like IDW and DC's crossovers, the depth of those has been fantastic, and this is certainly amen in that category. For me, it's Batman and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Anytime you're dealing with Batman's history with martial arts and, characters like Ra's al Ghul mixed in with everything that is so cool about the martial arts background of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it's just a crossover that makes sense. I love the two worlds meshing together and really embracing the differences between them as well as the similarities. It's just a great, great project for that.
Yeah, James, the writer, I remember before I had gotten the outline from him, I just started jotting down ideas in case they became relevant later on, if they could be used or something, and seeing ideas. And I didn't even know who like the major villains would be, and obviously Shredder, but like who would interact in the DC universe and stuff. I wrote down, or I typed in something like it would be the most obvious thing to have Ra's with his League sort of interacting. It would be because Ra's in the League of Shadows or the League of Assassins, whatever you want to, whatever it is, Shredder and the Foot Clan, they overlap a lot in their character types. And I actually was concerned that if that was the direction that we would go, that it would just be too much like, instead of Shredder, it's Ra's, whatever. Like that would be potentially how you'd mess it up, that it wouldn't really matter. You could, if I was drawing a Ra's pose, it would be all exactly the same if I just swapped it out for the Shredder or something. Like, in other words, readers wouldn't get anything new from it. They wouldn't get anything unique. But then whenever I got the outline from James and I read it, I saw what he was doing. He was playing that really nicely balanced, not compromise, but almost like a dance of having these similar elements that overlap, but you give it a twist, and that's what makes it interesting. You don't want to necessarily pair Shredder and stuff up with like Darkseid. It would just, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be so distinctly diametrically different. Actually, the similarities can make it very interesting to see the little twists on it and stuff. So, and the egos involved and all this other stuff. So I was very pleasantly surprised whenever I read the outline, and it's continued to develop as the scripts have come in. Things have changed and stuff just from discussions, ideas that James has had, and then also discussions with the editors involved and stuff. It's really when I'm reading the scripts, every time I get a new script, I'm really pleasantly surprised, and like as a fan, I'm excited that I get to draw those things, that are written in the script. They're very fun and cool. The type of stuff that's happening in the scripts is like a combination of, in some ways, fan service and exciting pacing, but also just well-served stories.
I love that you mentioned exciting pacing there, because that is one of the things that I think it takes it beyond just being fan service. It's where you've got... I love fan service, don't get me wrong on that end, but I think what gives a story depth is the fact that you've got that exciting pacing, that those moments when they hit, when they are clearly fan service, they are those moments that mean something more because of the path, the journey that we took to get there. And that's something that I think when you do it in a miniseries as opposed to a one-shot, you've got the page length and the story length to have that depth there.
Mm-hmm. If you do it as a one-shot, first of all, just thinking about the page length or the page count, which is 6 issues, so it's like 120 pages. If you were to do that, first of all, it'd be very hard to do that all as just like a graphic novel. But if you were to do that all in one big one shot, the pacing could be different, that you would basically make some of the story arcs shorter or longer or something like that. But it's nice to have that structure involved, almost, basically episodic structure built in to give you exclamation points of the sort of the climaxes at the end of each issue, which breaks it up. It breaks up the story and gives you a springboard to get you to the next part.
See, I would think 120 pages, you can knock that out in a week.
Oh, man. Boy, have you overestimated my capabilities. I wish. It's super labor intensive. It's crazy.
And it's a thing with you. One of the things I love about your art style is the amount of detail you throw into not only just the facial designs or when you're laying out the fight sequences, just some of the background details. Just a simple landscape is never simple with you, and I think that's something I've always loved about your artwork. And we're definitely seeing some really cool stuff with this series.
Thank you. This series is the culmination of every skill set I've ever learned. And, in the past, we've had a lot of conversations about different series that I've worked on, and I've been on the podcast several times. And each time, I'm sure I talk about like deadlines being crazy and how much time or effort something might have taken. But like looking back at the different sort of projects that I've worked on, I was often trying new techniques and stuff, but often they were kind of on the technical side where people might not even know the difference visually whenever they get it. So I put a lot of work developing certain processes, or it's hard for me to describe, but basically this is me putting a lot of work on the front end and the back end. The front end being the technical stuff. Also, I haven't released a lot of the ink wash, the black and white stuff so far. I have put some stuff on Instagram and Twitter and stuff like that, so you can see sort of the amount of detail. But to do it's very laborious. It is about 20 hours per page, no joke. And, since we're doing this, monthly, it's just a lot of time rendering, and it's a lot of time throughout. But the sort of storytelling and structure end of things, I'm very used to. I'm used to doing, spending a lot of hours on that. And sort of in the background, I would be either developing new technical stuff that would take time and would make my days long, or I'd be doing commissions or working on a second project or just whatever it is in the background. So I'd still have long days. With Batman Ninja Turtles, there is no other time for me to do anything else. I have to just focus on this, but not just like a 9-to-5 job, but literally between 15 to 18 hours a day. And that's from the beginning of the deadline to the end. That's the only way that I can make the deadlines. This is not me getting people to play the violin to say, woe is me. I'm the one who signed up for drawing it this way, and I knew that it would be laborious, and it's still incredibly exciting. I'm I'm lucky to be a part of it and stuff, but it's just to put it sort of into context that it's like, the fastest I've ever ran for the longest I've ever ran. It's like that sort of test or that sort of attempt to create this project. It's hard for me to describe it. Hopefully you know what I'm saying.
Oh no,
we can see the love. Honestly, we can, with looking at a lot of the larger splash pages, a couple of the fight sequences from 3 where Batman and the Turtles were going after the foot, and just how everything was laid out there. You could see, just the effort that you're putting into this, man. There's a bunch of sequences from the couple different fight sequences that I'm like, man, this is awesome. I want this for a poster.
Thanks. Yeah, and I want those things to feel like big payoffs. Actually, some of the more challenging stuff is that stuff is challenging, don't get me wrong, but just for context, those things can keep my focus, an artist's focus, for longer, because it's like I'm drawing this really fun, energetic fight scene. But occasionally you're drawing stuff that is like 20 people standing around or whatever it is. I'm using that as an example because I'm now I'm drawing issue 6, and this just has so much stuff going on in it, and a large amount of people, just the story, the logistics of the storytelling and all that stuff. To keep your energy and focus real high on the fun pages, the more splashy elements, the more exciting, in quotes, exciting pages where a lot of stuff is happening as far as like people doing backflips and cool stuff like that, it's easier to keep up your energy on that level. But then if you're drawing, just like a whole bunch of people to figure out how to like balance out your rendering and stuff like that, it's actually difficult to maintain your focus on the long haul, even on those sort of pages. If I'm any other artist who's listening to this in the audience will know what I'm talking about, but I might be just rambling, but I'm trying to explain it in a way that it's actually harder to do the less exciting pages,
I'm fascinated by that actually and process. So when you start expounding on that, it's really interesting to hear what that's like. Because I imagine that every artist is slightly different as far as how their process works, what their thought is on which pages motivate them, and which ones are the ones that kind of like I want to deliver the same level of quality on these pages. They're just not much my interest as when I finally get to this piece and be able to do that. I think there's that balance that I think anybody finds in any workflow that you can connect with, that I think is very interesting about this. One of the things that I was thinking about as we were talking about this, and I want to make sure I don't miss this when we start talking about issue 4, when we look at character designs in all of these, I've obviously got the DC characters, and I do want to talk about them, but the thing that fascinates me about the Turtles are, they're 4 turtles. And they're 4 Ninja Turtles. So, yes, they've got color differences between them, but one of the things that really struck me, and I've always enjoyed about some of the better artists that have worked on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I think is really hard to do, when you see each of these turtles, they have very unique personalities. While they look, the same basic size and things like that, there's some slight variations in them that give them their personality. I'm a big fan of the comic, but also I think what really drew me into them first was the cartoon when it was on, the animated one. And then that drew me back to the comics beforehand, where I'm like, oh, I'm really into these guys now. I want to start reading the comics more. Then I got into the films, and I actually really enjoy the franchise. I think at its best is when people really are able to show their personalities. How do you as an artist, because you did it so well, and that's why I really want to comment on this, you nailed their personalities in your artwork. How do you do that when they really are, they're 4 turtles? So, I mean, they're such similar creatures, yet you were able to nail the personalities. How did you do that? What was your process there?
I feel like I know them really well just because I've been a fan for so long. So I didn't, let's say, I think my first exposure to the Turtles were the color reprints, the ones there was 4 of them, books 1, 2, 3, and 4, but the Roman numerals were the numbering system. And I think I got number 4 first. I think that's what happened, like in a Walden's book or something like that. And then I went back and got the other ones, like probably within a year or 2. The reason I'm bringing that up, though, is because by that point, so whenever I first started reading it, the Turtles were pretty developed visually, and there were some subtle differences and stuff. And then, if I'm remembering my timeline correctly, then I saw the cartoon. I think it was like that. I'm a huge fan of the Eastman Laird stuff, and then the IDW series is very good. And if you look at the IDW series, even from the first issue, because there's been like maybe 8 or 9 artists on the book, and they still come and go. But what I'm saying is, it hasn't been the same guy who's evolved, but there's been several artists who have applied differences to their head shapes and bandana shapes and the types of belts they have and stuff to give them a more individual look. So I'm definitely not the first one to think of that. It was just whenever I saw that, I thought it looked like a great idea. I mean, Eastman and Laird started it back before, but with like having Leonardo's having like the 2 straps that came across his chest, and he was a little bit shorter than like Donatello usually was a little taller and stuff. There's just different ways to distinguish them. But so what I did really, I mean, talking specifically, like the making the sausage type in quotes. Mm-hmm. I say that because I heard that recently, and I thought that was an interesting phrase, where like the actual how you do it is, for me, I just went through a whole bunch of my comics, because I got a ton of like Ninja Turtle comics, and started sketching out things that I really liked. Like I was taking note of, I created style guides for myself essentially, but I was taking pieces that I thought were neat from how different artists handled the individual differences of the characters, and then adding my own things to create a visual language for each of the characters. And I did post some of those style guides online that I've tweeted and Instagrammed and stuff, where I just did a variety of different, I try to give each of the turtles their own unique head shape and bandana shape, and, just anything to make them a little visually different. And then when it comes to color, of course, they have different skin colors, slightly different hues of green and stuff to try to make them different. So, you just try to work it all together. Because, if you pick up the black and white, like the reprints of the original, Eastman Laird Ninja Turtle stuff, it is very difficult to tell them apart. Mm-hmm. And so it's just, you just find ways to differentiate them. I'm really happy that I had that lead time, because it was back in like late April or early May of 2015, and I had several months before I really started on the book. There was some time for me to kind of get my thoughts straight on how I'd handle them. And in the past, I've oftentimes had to jump into a project with both feet already running with, zero sort of thought. I just had to draw fast. And it was good to, I'm really hoping to apply the sort of like the same sort of foundational work that I worked on, or that I developed for Batman Ninja Turtles, I want to do for all my projects from now on, if possible, just because it gives you a lot of time, or it gives you a lot of a strong foundation that later on pays off. Like whenever you're getting only 4 or 5 hours of sleep later on, it's very hard to remember exactly how to draw the characters, to, if you haven't done your homework ahead of time. Like, I have a style guide right in front of me, so I'm always checking back on that to make sure I have all the little buttons on the belts correct, and, the head shapes specifically correct. So anyway, that's sort of like the reality of the situation, is just to do a bunch of homework up front and then try to stick to that, and don't get lazy. I say it like that because that's like a personal internal monologue philosophy. It's like, just don't be lazy, just check back again. If you've drawn Leonardo, 1,000 times, but just make sure you're checking back on that style guide to make sure you're not missing something. And I still miss stuff that I have to go back and go, geez, and then fix it. Like, how many times have I missed the 2 straps coming over his shoulder that hold the scabbards on his back? I've missed it a whole bunch of times, but, I just make sure to go back and fix it, and don't be lazy.
One of the things that I've really enjoyed about getting to know you over the years is, we met you out of pure love for your artwork. That was how our first contact happened.
Oh, that's sweet.
Group hug. But one of the things that I've really enjoyed is watching you continue to grow as an artist. And I think that really my favorite artists, why they remain my favorite artists, is I feel like we travel on a journey with you, whether we get to, the great part about us as fans of yours, we get to know you personally, not just through the podcast, but also through your outreach. You make yourself very accessible through social media, and really getting to know kind of what it's like to hang with you, which is very cool that you do that. I really admire it. You're constantly trying new things and trying to improve your craft and just keep evolving more. And I think that is very true of the artists that I've always grown up with and loved. I really enjoyed going on that journey and feeling like I remember my first Freddie issue on a book. Loved that. Look where we are now. And I'm loving it even more because I've gotten to be a part of this kind of experience through various projects and things. And when you talk about how, I'm trying this new thing with this one, this is my process here. And this is something that I would like to do now on future projects. When you're hitting on things like that, I really like hearing that, because I think it's very valuable to people listening to this who, have aspirations to be an artist, but I think it's also for us as fans, just kind of this understanding of the evolution and the background of what goes into just great comics. And it's something that I always have loved about the medium. It's not a static medium at all. It's constantly evolving. We constantly see growth and change in how stories are developed and how they're unleashed on us. And it's what makes this such an exciting medium, because of the fact that it isn't static, for lack of a better one. And it is due to artists such as yourself who are constantly pushing to let's push that envelope. Let's see where we can go from here and keep doing that. Your efforts certainly aren't lost.
There are some legitimate criticisms that, if you have too many reboots or too many retreading of the same material over and over, that it can get thin. And I have those same thoughts, and I can understand where people are coming from with that. There are times where you just have to hit your deadline, and there's not time to be to try to be innovative or to be inspired. It's just, you just have to muscle it out. And I've been in that situation myself. I think most commercial artists are in that situation on a regular basis. And sometimes you just have to do that. But it's good even in those times to try to learn from those situations in ways that might not be very tangible. But it's like, here's an example is, if you're under the gun on a deadline and after you finish the deadline or while you're doing it, you realize I have a tendency to do this type of composition whenever I'm being hurried. It could be like a medium shot that's right at eye level, but it's the most clearly demonstratable or clearly communicative to the reader. But if you do that too often, it starts to get boring. It starts to look like you're watching a television show instead of a movie. You want it to be more dynamic. So then if you learn from that situation, and then even the next time you're under a super heavy deadline or something, you just remind yourself, okay, don't use that sort of camera position too often. Even though I hardly have any time to draw this, I can at least incorporate that sort of thing. So anyway, I mean, it's very nice stuff that you said, but it's, for anyone who's trying to get into the industry or who is curious about that sort of process or whatever, it's important to always look for ways to explore the craft and to learn, even if you don't really have the time to as thoroughly explore it as whenever I was describing, style guides and that sort of thing. So, for example, if like in a month I had, I was, going to get to do a fill-in job for a book, and it's like, we need it in 2 weeks or whatever it is, I'm not going to have the time to like start sketching out all the characters in this very elaborate fashion. I'm just going to have to jump in with both feet and start running as fast as I can. But during that time, I will still try to construct some sort of style guide for myself based on the previous artist's work or just something. I'm kind of rambling, but you try to apply those things as much as you can, as whatever you have the time for, and hope that as much of the experience comes through as possible.
In those cases, do you find that you go to things, because you create a toolbox is a lot of what you're talking about here. Every time I think you do something new, it becomes a part of your toolbox, because I've heard terminology that you've used. Probably it's one of the nice things about doing so many of these with you is we've gotten to learn a lot of the new techniques and styles that you have been adopting over the years, or kind of fleshing out and trying to do new things with. They become a part of your toolbox. When you do style guides for certain characters like this, and then you mention a fill-in issue, do you then go in your mind to, when I was crafting this character, there's some similarities here, let me pull some of those ideas in to make this work? Is that how you do those projects then, when it is more of a tighter deadline, you don't have the luxury of being able to do some of this?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. It's also kind of like, you might also look for, let's see, there are times that like drawing a character wrong from different angles is sort of the right thing to do because it matches their silhouette better. So what I mean is, if you were drawing, Batman, he has the 3 spikes on his forearm. This would be the easiest to describe. If you were to actually construct a gauntlet that looked like that yourself and then took photos of your arm at different positions or different angles, there are going to be times that those 3 different spikes are going to look like one spike because it's just aligned in a certain way with the camera. The front one is eclipsing the other 2. And that's less interesting. It's harder to understand. If a reader sees that, they're going to think, he only has 1 now. It's like it reduces the recognizability of that gauntlet or something. Well, I understand that about Batman. So if I'm drawing a fill-in issue about, of another character, I'm going to say Blue Beetle just because I remember doing a fill-in issue of that. Let's say I was drawing a fill-in issue of Blue Beetle and he has like certain things that jut out from the body, like little spikes kind of on the back of his head or back of his shoulders. I would make sure that no matter what sort of angle I was drawing his body at, even if technically, realistically, if you had an action figure or something, those spikes would kind of like one would eclipse the other one and you wouldn't see it. I would always find a way to kind of cheat it and make sure you could see both. Or the same thing with like the chest symbol or something. You would just find a way to basically have the character slightly face the camera more so that you could always see the chest. It's just stuff like that. I don't know. I mean, and so you learn from the other previous experience, either from style guides or just drawing the character, drawing different characters, just drawing comic books, I guess is what I'm trying to say, for 10 plus years. You just learn a bunch of tricks like that. And then you try, when you're feeling inspired, you make up new rules or new observations or something. But then whenever you're under the gun, you fall back on as many of the rules as you can, and but still try to make it look like you're having, an inspired time, even if you're just trying to get through the page.
When you're doing a crossover like this, do the companies in question give you some parameters as far as what era of the characters you should be working with, or anything specific like that? I mean, do they say you have to do Batman from this time frame, or the Joker from this time frame, or Ra's al Ghul from here, or the case of obviously Ninja Turtles, you want to make sure Shredder or Casey Jones or these characters kind of fit this era. I know that as the era has shifted for all those characters, there's so many strong similarities that they carry on through, but is that something that they I don't want to say impose, because it makes it sound like such a negative. I guess I'm wondering how much of a fence they put around you when you're doing this, without making that sound negative. I'm curious how I'm actually more curious how the process works than I am trying to even say that as any of it being a negative one way or another. What does that look like?
I mean, I don't take it it doesn't sound like you're trying to say a negative, but I mean I don't remember any specific communication, as far as them saying, and make sure you're drawing the New 52 version of Batman. It was just, it's just that's what Batman looks like right now. I mean, so I don't know if they would have, let's say I would have drawn the version of Batman with the yellow oval. If I had drawn that in my initial drawings, if I was trying to draw that version, if that was my favorite version, they probably would have had an opinion. They probably would have then said, no, draw the modern version or something, maybe. But really, I just took it as I'm drawing the current versions of these characters, even if the continuity, where exactly does this fit in continuity? Big question mark. Who knows exactly where? I know James has told me, he has teased a couple times. I've heard him say, I know exactly where I think this story fits into continuity, but he just won't say. So either he's being mysterious or, whatever. But anyway, I just knew to draw the current version. I mean, a good question would be, if I had drawn the yellow oval version, what they would have said and whatever. So I don't know. I just drew the current version. So
one of the things I'm digging about, because I got issue 4 right now, I'm looking at it, just your opening segment, the first 2 pages, which it was a really cool just initial splash of Arkham, which I absolutely love how you draw Arkham, by the way. But then as we slowly shift through and you start bringing the Joker into the story, and I love that opening page where he's kind of ghostly image through the glass, and then you flip the page and you're at the full body image, and he's still behind glass, so he's not completely clear. But in the Doctor, you got the crisp Doctor, the Joker there, and then you zoom in on the close-up on her eyes. And I was just like, man, just within that one page, that was a really creepy and awesome-looking Joker.
Thank you. Yeah, it's supposed to be very, very Silence of the Lambs. I mean, it's not where he's standing there and saying, good evening, Clarice, or whatever, but it's more like, that's sort of, in my mind, that was the model for the cells and hopefully some of the mood and that sort of thing. It's, if you were to watch Silence of the Lambs, which is one of my favorite movies, it's a great movie. Her walking through, Jodie Foster's character walking through the basement, and everything it's like an old cobblestone sort of building. It looks like it could have been built in the late 1800s or something. That's very much how Arkham is, and so that's sort of what what I was trying to provoke in the visuals. Everything is like cold brick, it's a building that really probably doesn't have central heating. I actually put a space heater in the hallway. In my mind, that's the case. When she's looking out the window, there's a space heater right next to her, and that's the reason that I put it there. That wasn't specified in the script. That's just, I picture it as an old drafty building that should have been heavily renovated, but it would have cost 3 times the amount as they would have had in the budget, so they just kept it looking like an old insane asylum.
Speaking of characters in that first 2 pages, Dr. Zahir, I really loved your handling of her because of what was going on in that sequence. We talk about a lot of times how you handle facial expression, but one of the things that also struck me is, besides that, her body mannerisms. This is somebody who is right from the first, what is your name, sir? It was kind of very clear she's been through this multiple times, and she's not getting what she wants out of this situation. And I really loved how your artwork matched where the story was going with that and the dialogue, because you've got 3 panels in a row there where there's the interview and she's like, yeah, I got it, you're the foot, that whole thing. Keep him as far away from the other inmates, from the other Foot Clan members as possible, because I don't want any of them I mean, she doesn't say this, but I totally got this from the artwork. I don't want any of them reinforcing this idea that just keep saying you're of the foot. Because I want one of them to crack, because this conversation's getting old. I loved that when you have a certain emotion that's built through a combination of artwork and dialogue in comics, you start to fill in with a whole bunch of other stuff. By that 3rd panel there, I had a whole other story that was going on. I could have stretched out that page, and that right off of that panel right there, another 5 or 6 panels with what was going on in my head. And that is, I think, a gift in comics. It's these isolated panels that seem like, these are only 3 panels. Or no, there's so much rich story that's coming out of that artists and writers working together in comics, when they really got a good story going with some really real emotion being built there, they take you places that you just start filling in all these blanks in those little white lines that are left between those panels. I loved that sequence, mainly because of how much emotionally I was getting out of her. By the time she got to the Joker, I'm like, she's been through a whole lot. Now she got this guy to deal with.
Yeah, she's like double his medication. But in sometimes it's not always spelled out as clearly in the script. Although James was very clear about how he wanted the Doctor's mannerisms to be, and how frustrated she should be and stuff. So I was just trying to realize his script at that point. But it's not always like that. Sometimes how should the orderly be walking around? Is he in fear of the Joker? Is he just there doing his job and is just like, whatever, or the sort of stance that the Foot Clan guy, should he look bug-eyed and freaked out, or should he just look stoic, or should he look cowering? A lot of those types of things you have to get into the character of the scene in your mind. One of the reasons working on roughs is so rough layouts for the pages is so taxing is it's difficult to describe, but you're trying to get inside the mindset of each of these characters, and you're trying to think of like cool camera angles, and you're also trying to think of how you can lead the reader's eye through the page, which affects how people's stances and poses, which way they're pointing or which way they're looking, and events that happen on page 5 where the character needs to be on the left-hand side of the page to make the reveal better. Turn the page, or who they're talking to needs to be on the right side of the page. Then that affects how to get them to that page. Should they start on the left-hand side? It's this long. It's a very mentally taxing, at least for me. It's a very mentally taxing process, and it takes me almost a week to complete roughs. That entire week is a bad week for me. I'm in kind of a grumpy mood that is, got to listen to just music. I can't focus on anything else. I have to have total immersion in that world to really make the storytelling as strong as possible. And that includes the postures of the characters and all this stuff. I'm embarrassed to admit those things, like to think that every month I have to be a Grumposaurus for a week. And I make it very clear to Kiki, my wife, at the very beginning of the week, like, this week I'm working on roughs, and she knows exactly what that means. She's very forgiving with that sort of thing. But what I'm saying is, I'm glad that you noticed that, and you've always, you guys have always noticed that kind of stuff, but that you notice that, because it's a lot of work. In this book, the Batman Ninja Turtles book has been very successful, super surprisingly popular, which I'm very grateful and happy and lucky to be a part of. But even on the books that hardly get any readers, so the books that I've drawn in the past, like The Movement or Jonas Quantum or Captain Atom, who actually the readers' numbers were pretty low. I went through all the same process. Me and the writer went through the same sort of like in-depth, deep thinking, like trying to get inside the minds of the characters and stuff like that. It's great that this book is getting such popularity and recognition, and that those types of things are noticed. But it's really, it's basically that's our job, is to try to like really explore these characters and these environments and how they would interact with each other. And it's an awful lot of work, and sometimes it's pretty frustrating when really no one sees it or reads it, on the less popular books,
You know what, though? I think it's one of the nice things about projects like this where we can, because you just shouted out some of your previous work. I've always found that at some point in time, it's my first meeting of an artist, first meeting of a writer. And when I find that there are people that I really like on a project, I go back and, I start looking at their bibliography. I want to see what other work have you done, because I'm into it. It's like this project is the one that sparked me. It's like, because comics, there's such a diverse range of talent that, there's a lot of people that like, friends of mine have been talking about for years. Like, I really love this artist. Well, I just haven't encountered that person in a project yet. And when I do, it's kind of like, whoa, I really like this. I want to see more. And that's been my entire experience my whole life with comics. When you find that first thing and you have that connection to the story that's being unfolded before your eyes, you want to see more. And you want to catch what you've missed. And a lot of times it is the books that you're mentioning where they didn't have the same kind of sales numbers as a project like this. It's an opportunity, and I do encourage people listening to this to do that. Look and go back to your favorite artists and check out their work that you missed before to see what it looked like when they were telling different kinds of stories with different characters, because it's such a great experience. I'm a big fan of the journey with creative teams, and that's something that I think is part of the fun of comics. Is just seeing different projects when they come together. It's a lot of, I think, where there's connections to other media, because we follow actors and actresses, right? When we enjoy them in their roles, we follow directors, we follow wow, they give me a really great experience. Comics has that same. It's art. Those are all. That's the connectivity of those type of things. You want to follow that and see more. I would be remiss, because I'm looking at these pages, if I did not comment on it. I didn't want to jump to this right away because it's so easy to jump to it right away. Dude, your Joker's eyes scare the hell out of me, and I love that about it, because I'm a huge Batman fan. That's the character I geek out about. It's the one that brought me to the dance since I was a kid. I've never wavered in my love for this character and the whole universe surrounding him. Jim mentioned before your Arkham Asylum. I can't echo enough how much I love the personality in Arkham Asylum. But the Joker was one of those things where I've seen so many, and I love different artists doing different takes on the Joker. He's such a classic character that has been done so well by so many. I love when artists put their own unique stamp on it. And while taking those pieces that you're like, these are some essentials. These are some, like, I love the long V mouth and all that kind of thing. Your Joker, the eyes, it's where you get into the head of. I've always thought the Joker at his best, when he's really done at his best, is when he tells these jokes and he finds humor in everything. But man, he finds the humor in really scaring people in what he does.
Right.
And those eyes in every panel in that beginning, the eyes specifically tell the whole story. I love that panel where it zoomed in on them, but it was the build to that really struck me. It was funny how his smile, for me, took on as the panels increased the focus on the eyes, when you shifted back out to his mouth, that took a more sinister tone to me too. It just added a creep factor to him. Very classic in its look, but at the same time, it exuded a sinister that I don't always see in the character, and I really love the fact that I'm like, this is why he's one of Batman's deadliest villains. There is a psychological aspect to the Joker that his presence, when done right, exudes. There was a presence there that I was just like, man, the creep factor here, I was like ready to high five. It was really, really awesome. And it really struck me. And I want to make sure I mention that, because it was something for me as a big Batman geek. I really loved the presentation.
Cool. Yeah, the part of my thinking with that is that I don't know if you've ever seen the movie called The Devil's Advocate with Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino. There's something in the commentary of that. I can't remember who the director is, but the director describes. So Keanu Reeves' character walks into a restroom. He's just been in court, realized his client is lying to him. He's a defense attorney. He knows now that his client was lying to him. And in the bathroom, he's having he takes a recess and he goes to the restroom. He's splashing water on his face, and he realizes he's having like an internal conflict. Like, what does he do? He splashes water on his face, and then he looks at himself, and it looks like he's smiling with these dead eyes. But what the director said is he's actually supposed to be checking his teeth to see if he has like, just to make sure he doesn't have anything in between his teeth or just whatever. He's not smiling. He's basically getting into character. He's made a decision within himself that he's going to go out there and do his job and try to get his client free, even though he knows his client is a scumwad. So the point I'm making though is that sort of, it's not like I specifically referenced that. I didn't like pull up that DVD and find that frame or whatever, but it's that sort of thinking. It's the dead-eyed. I want his eyes to look intense and kind of alien. And so his smile doesn't reflect in his eyes. His eyes are like conveying a different emotion. There was some sort of experiments with people who, I can't remember what this is called, but there was basically an experiment where people with some sort of, there's a disorder that makes it where it's difficult for certain people to like read people's emotions. Like the experiment that they did was they would show the person who had a hard time reading emotion, like close-ups of eyes and mouths, to try to get them to register what was the emotion that they were conveying here. Through that process, really, through watching that documentary or whatever it was probably 15 years ago that I saw that, but it made me realize, like, when you're smiling, like if you're at a family gathering and they're like, everyone get together for the picture, and then like 7 people are taking photos, and so you're smiling, trying to look genuine for like 15 minutes. Everyone has experienced this. After a while, your face just kind of gets like tired and starts to get sore from making the same sort of smile expression, and you look bored. In the photos, you just look weird, and it's because you're not really smiling anymore genuinely. You're just kind of displaying your teeth. You just have your mouth in this weird position. Your eyes like have no joy in them, So it's like when you smile authentically, you're smiling with your whole face. Joker doesn't smile with his whole face, not in that way. He has this like gargoyle mouth that's just kind of in a smile triangle, but his eyes are conveying something totally different. It's like this intensity that, you'd never want to be on the receiving end of. Anyway, that's what I think about it. I've seen other versions of the Joker, but at least the darker versions of the Joker, I think that's what he's doing. It's this weird intensity that has nothing to do with joy. It's like creep factor.
Yeah, definitely creep factor is a good description there. And I loved how we go from this really cool, creepy sequence and then to a fun sequence. And again, that was some great, just one layout, but also, absolutely loved Alfred getting this stack of pizzas, and you hear the crash and the rattle, and you're like, oh, this is going to be good. Flip the page, and we get a cowabunga. I hooped and hollered on that sequence as he's skating down the banister.
The original script was a little bit different. His final sort of reaction was like he tells Alfred something like, in the original script was like, "What's wrong? You look angry," or something like that. But of course he would look angry. He'd look very annoyed at that whole experience, and then they changed it around a little bit. But that I want to make a note of something that each time we've had pizza in these different issues, and there's pizza in the next issue. Spoiler alert! In issue 5, I've incorporated somebody kind of from the different members of the creative team. Not myself, but I have. In the first issue, it said Pina's Pizza, and that's David Pina. He was the associate editor. He's no longer at DC. He moved back to New York and stuff, but he was very instrumental in the early issues. So it's Pina's Pizza. In the second issue, it's Titi's Pizza. That's my wife, Kiki. All of our nieces and nephews call her Titi. And then in issue, I'm trying to think of the next issue, there was maybe it's in the issue 4 is the next, so this one is the next time that there's pizza. It's called Pizza Wick, and that's Jim Chadwick. And then in the next one, there is Pizza the Fourth, which is a reference to James, the writer, because he's the fourth. Anyway, I just tried to incorporate, so I wanted to point that out because there's like, people are probably like, if they pay attention to the pizza name, they're probably like, what is that? But that's Jim Chadwick's pizza branch.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love Alfred's. He sometimes gets annoyed when his competence at anything is questioned, because this is the guy that's Batman's right-hand man, right? And in many ways, he's been also part of Batman's training. He's an extreme confidant. This is a guy who's a very important VIP character. But he's also very similar to how Bruce has to put on a mask. He has to put on the mask. He is the butler, but it's so much more than the butler. So I love the bits where, like, he gets the pizza and then, like, as it's close, teenagers, you know, that kind of thing. I loved the whole mannerism of that, because somebody of his stature who has been through everything that he's been through with Batman and deals with as much as he does, I like that every so often we see him get a little sassy like this, because it would be the case, because he's a very important character. And yet this would be his role. This is part of Batman's got his mask. This is Alfred's mask. He can't be the guy that goes in the cave with Bruce all the time. He's got to portray this role as well. Case in point, into his background. I love when these sequences play out like that, because there's such a reality to his varied emotions as well. One of my favorite characters of all time in comics, and he's these moments where you get to see this whole sequence of events. Yes, there's a lot of humor to it. The humor is that much more poignant when the characters are nailed. And you get to that and you're like, oh, man, I just totally get this. It doesn't take away from the serious nature of the story, because one of the things we've avoided talking about is the Turtles are basically ticking time bombs at this point. They know that because they're here and they don't know if they're going to be even able to find a way back, because of the nature of the mutagen that made them who they are, that is going to fail at some point, and they're going to go back to being turtles.
Yeah, in issue 2, it was revealed, basically Batman did a blood test, and he discovered that the mutagen that makes them mutants will eventually go inert, because something to do with the fact that it doesn't exist in the DC universe. So it'll basically anything that came through this particular dimensional portal will eventually revert back to its DC Comics universe counterpart. So a human that exists in both. So like if Shredder is stranded, in the DC universe, that's all right. But since the mutagen doesn't exist natively in the DC universe, it'll turn into something else. It'll turn into some inert chemicals that would make the turtles unmutate, or it would kill them or something. It would definitely be bad for them. Yeah, so they're just... It's a good storytelling device because it gives you a ticking clock, a sort of natural ticking clock as far as why there's an urgency to this. But aside from that, it creates an urgency within the story that the longer there's any sort of mystery, the longer that they have a problem with the technology to get them back to their home universe, the worse off it'll be. There's a real fear of that. So any Raphael ends up having a real problem with it, which is later on in the same sequence, that there's a real threat to them, even if it doesn't come in the form of somebody stabbing them with claws.
I like seeing that the Turtles deal with that. Each one of them deals with it in ways that match their personality. Because the whole skateboarding sequence, really, when you see that there, is really, this is a way of unwinding. This is happening to him. For some people, they get angry. Other people, they escape into some form of pleasure, some form of outlet that, helps them kind of escape for that in that moment, to not have that overpower them. And I liked the usage of it as a storytelling tool. If you don't know who the Turtles are, you do. But by the time you're in issue 4, it's really clear who these characters are and the distinction between each of the 4. And I think that's something that was really key in this series, and it's where there's so much depth to it that I'm really enjoying, is visually we get to know them through their dialogue, we get to know through what's going on in the story. There's a lot of really cool stuff being told here in a way that I think adds to the interactions between the characters of the two universes, because of the fact that their personalities are converging in ways like this. And I think it's just really fun.
Yeah, and I wanted to point out something like earlier when you were talking about Alfred. I think he likes to be annoyed. I think that's a part of his... It's like, to liken it to some real world people like Kiki's grandmother, who Kiki is very close to, and we hang out with her often. She likes to be razzed. She likes to be given a hard time, and that's just part of her sense of humor. She likes to act like the things you're giving her a hard time about, like it actually bothers her or something like that. She's pretty short, and so if I were to mention something about her being short, she would act like it really bothers her, even though there is no bothering. And I think Alfred's very much in that vein. But each of the Ninja Turtles are, if I were Michelangelo, And basically, I'm not very good at being a detective, and I'm not very good at trying to like reverse engineer some sort of mutagen on a molecular level or something like that. What else is there to do? You know what I mean? If you're Michelangelo and you're sitting in the cave, hey, let's have a good time on the dinosaur. Let's have a, let's skateboard down the railing because they've got some great railings there at the Wayne Manor. So, I can't blame them.
I'm glad you brought up the dinosaur, because I got to tell you, when they first were in the cave, and the first thing he does is he hops on the dinosaur, woo-hoo, and he's riding the dinosaur. I was laughing hysterically with that because, again, it's so fit his personality. And then I even like how they called him on it, like, we're trying to get this guy to help us. This is probably not the best way to do it.
I was personally that made me laugh when I was reading it. Whenever I was working on it, it was really fun. And then I had a great experience that, Kevin Eastman really liked that panel as well. And, he's a personal hero of mine and artistic, idol and stuff like that. So, he had a really good time with that and had tweeted about it. And anyway, yeah, it was a really fun, and that's one of the, James is really, he's a very strong writer, but specifically in this project, he's done a very good job of making the overall story strong and interesting and dangerous and all this stuff. But he also takes, he makes sure to find the room to give character moments, that's usually the first casualty of a big story. If you have a lot that's happening, oftentimes you just realistically don't have the time, or rather the space in the book to give those sort of character moments. But he finds ways and interesting cuts, what you're cutting away to and from, will provide time or space for the characters to have those moments.
Leonardo and Batman sparring was absolutely awesome. Because, you remember, these are the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So, Batman, I've always loved the concept of Batman training. The idea that this is a guy who's honed himself to be a fighting machine because of the fact that he doesn't have superpowers. Batman's superpower is not just his intellect. I love the detective. I'm a big fan of that part of it. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I also like the fact that as a rational man, you would say, in order to really combat everything that I've got to combat in Gotham, I need to become this fighter. I need to continue to hone myself, learn as many different fighting styles and skills. So the opportunity to really brush up on his fighting skills doing this, it makes sense for Leonardo. He's a ninja. They would do this. Batman would do this. It's just a natural marriage of the two properties when you do that. To me, whenever there's a great fight sequence in any comic, you fill in so much of the blanks of where things are popping off the page, and it feels like a movie. And I was totally watching these two coming at each other, seeing the tete-a-tete, the trade-off. Batman's throwing the punch and Leonardo's falling back. It was all Matrix in my mind. I love seeing that stuff in a way where it starts having, I started hearing music, and sound effects in the fight. I love that in great combat. It's something that I think works well. That whole page just had such a beautiful flow to me because I love Superman. I love Spider-Man. I love the characters with the superpowers. Don't get me wrong. That type of stuff's really cool to me. But Batman, I always loved the way he honed himself. And when you get the combat just right with him, it reminds you that this man is a martial artist. Leonardo is a martial artist. I loved the way that played out. There was a poetry in motion there that really is what I geek out about as a Batman fan. And it was great to see it done service here.
Thanks. I want to be up front about, like, if people have read issue 2, there's like a big fight where Batman is basically feeling out. He's getting a feel for the turtles, like whether or not they're trying to do lethal attacks, whether or not how skilled they are, and that sort of thing. He's kind of feeling them out. So he's definitely not attempting to attack them with full ferocity or anything in issue 2. And the same thing here with this fight scene with him, or sparring scene rather, with him and Leo. It's very much like if you were to watch martial arts sparring for training purposes, you see that they're not going all out. If they do, it's actually bad form. It's a bad, it's impolite to do that. And so that's very much the case here, because Leo gets the upper hand both times, but I think it's partially because, it would be like, I liken it, first of all, Leonardo, he's my favorite turtle, but I realistically know that if he and Batman were going one-on-one, even if Batman didn't have his armor or didn't have his gadgets or something, Batman would win. It just flat out, hopefully, no Ninja Turtle fan is offended by that. It's just Batman is that good. Now, Leo's my favorite, so I'm not even biased. I'm just looking at it. But the point, though, is that both times Batman underestimated exactly how good Leo is, because Leo, I think, is the best fighter. Raph is probably the next best, but he loses composure too quickly. But the point that I'm making is, it's like I would liken it if you're playing chess with somebody who actually you're better than, but you want to make it sporting and maybe you're trying some new strategies and that sort of thing, but you get yourself in a position where like, oh, actually he's a lot better than I thought. I underestimated this guy and now, oops, I've just been judo flipped onto my back, That was basically the sort of feel of it, and it is a personal victory for Leo and for me because I got to draw Leo doing that to Batman. But it's, very much we were sparring and I didn't quite expect him to be that good during the spar. There's even kind of a remark to that where Batman's like, I was distracted, and Leo's like, yeah, just keep telling yourself that. But it's all in good nature, and they're both smiling, and that to me is that's my favorite part of it, is the good-naturedness of it. Because oftentimes in comics, especially in a Batman situation, it's easy for it to get darker and darker, and then it gets even darker after that. And here I like that sort of twist where it's not a goofy lightness, but it's just a good-natured lightness.
I took it to be what sparring be like with the Robins. Over the years when because obviously they would train together. They're not going to go all out, and the idea is for them honestly on both sides, you want to learn how to take a fall. You want to learn how to do throws. This is all a part of the process, and I really loved the fact that it seemed like the two of them were really trying with each other while at the same time it felt like it's different than a traditional battle that you would see in that. It was very cool.
With this fight sequence and then the fight sequence in the previous issue where Batman's the field general and he's calling it out, and even the one point in time Leonardo's like, yes sir, and it was kind of funny because Raph immediately did not like the fact that he's following orders from this guy, and it's something that would just carries over into this issue. And it's Raph's character, it's Leo's character. He would recognize Batman as the leader, as the field general. And I thought seeing how this flowed through that issue, seeing how it flowed through this issue, their first confrontation where they acknowledged that he wasn't going for lethal blows and whatnot, it was kind of a neat evolution of this fight sequence.
Mm-hmm. And from I've done a lot of role-playing games when I was in high school and stuff, and there's a certain, I'm saying that because you get inside the mind of the character and getting inside the mind of like Splinter's sort of leadership as a master versus Batman's sort of leadership. Batman's almost like an in-between of Leo and Splinter. He's almost like because he's still in the field, but he's also a master. I think Leo responds to that without ego. And I like that he basically is willing to, when the situation presents itself, he will step up as leader, and he's used to that. But he also he has no ego about it, that he recognizes that, in this situation, it's important to follow to follow Batman, because Batman has a greater experience in the situation. You know what I mean? I'm at a loss for words, but I hope you...
Well, Batman's not a reluctant leader. He jumps right into the role.
Right. Yeah, and he's more qualified in this situation, especially with these sort of stakes, and it's his home turf. But maybe if Batman was even in the Ninja Turtle universe, maybe Leo would be still tempted or more apt to take a second seat to him because of the sort of dominance of Batman's personality.
And they are teenagers too, and it's a teenager dealing with an adult. And I do like the fact that with the good ninja stories, they are teenage mutant ninja turtles, so they do have that immaturity. They do have that, because sometimes when I used to paintball, and it used to amaze us because all these little kids would be out there, and we're these adults, and this one kid was kind of completely just flagrantly breaking the rules, and my buddy Joe just cut into him, big time. And the kid, we thought Joe was going to make him cry, because here is this adult saying, "Young man, what do you think you're doing?" And just, it was like a dad just chewing down a kid, and we were laughing, and then it dawned on us, oh yeah, we're adults, these are kids.
You may have just confessed to laughing at the bullying of this child. I'm just pointing that out right now.
Yeah, I am too. I was really going to go with the whole thing that Batman's relationship with the Ninja Turtles is working so well because of the fact that the Robins are usually teenagers as well, and you took this whole brutality on kids.
I'm just joking. I think I know, especially if the kid was being disrespectful and that sort of thing. But the whole situation needed to be brought in under control. So I'm just giving you a little bit of a hard time that about it. But that would be the clickbait headline, though. If there was an article about this that somebody wrote online, it would be that you endorsed bullying or something.
That wouldn't be the worst thing said about me, to be honest. Let's be blunt.
Well, that would have been your singing, but I'm actually pulling up the 3D holographic image of that paintball event. It's funny. A lot of times we talk to you, it seems to be there's cool technology, visual effects that are incorporated into the story at some point in time where you get to see this kind of this additional layer to the frame that we're viewing that is so interesting. I love the use of it here. The thing that I love about the Turtles and what really worked in their relationship with Batman here is you got to see varying relationships with Batman and varying levels of respect and awe of his world, his Batcave. I love when they first entered the Batcave. You referenced the dinosaur earlier, but I also love their initial reaction to, "Oh, this base is cool." It was like, and seeing the technology like this unfolding from the cowl and how that is a thing. That was always my lens into Batman, because Batman's, as a kid, yeah, I threw on a cape and would run around and pretend I was Batman, but it's when you watch the show, when you read the comics, the Robins are usually they're your lens into, I can hang with him because of this role. Mm-hmm. The Turtles are that way as well. Like, it's funny how identifiable they are, where their teenage qualities where they're just like in awe and having fun with the tech and things like that. I'm like, well, that'd be me. I would be like, wow, dude, you can see me fighting with and you would want to, can you give me a copy of this? I want to look at this later. And who wouldn't want that? I think that part helps. So neat.
It helps to give an example or to demonstrate how cool it is by having somebody remark about how cool it is. It ends up being the voice of the reader.
Because you want to be there. You want to do that.
Yeah, it would be intimidating, but to be around. Meaning, because I don't know if you've ever been in this situation, but like if you meet somebody that's cool, you really want their approval, and then if you end up saying, act up too much, they might yell at you for doing the wrong thing in paintball or something. But seriously, I mean, it might be where Batman seems overall good-natured once he realized what the Turtles were all about and stuff like that in the series. But yeah, it would be neat to be in that situation, but you hope that you don't overstay your welcome or go too far with something, which is what Raphael has almost a situation like that. You're not sure how Batman's going to react because he gets so aggressive.
I love that this sequence takes us back into the serious nature of this story, because you see the DNA strand and what's really happening to them. And I love that this story has such a great sense of the fun factor that you love with Batman stories and the Turtle stories, while at the same time giving you this sense of danger, this sense of mystery, this sense of how are they going to be able to overcome this, and the fact that behind the scenes you've got the villains doing all of their usual mischief. It's got like all the elements of what I really love about really good storytelling in all medium. It really is, you got to get to know the characters, you got to care about the characters and care about their plight and what's happening to them in a way that makes sense. And this story really does that. I love that, how it just goes back to the serious in a fluid way, where you didn't really lose anything in the moments that you just had, but it led us back to, and Cyborg's analyzing this. I love that the Justice League was brought in, kind of off panel there. And it added another sense of, yeah, this is a part of a larger universe that's there, and a nice reference point. And let's go back into this really cool mystery, because we can't ignore the fact that they're potentially I don't know if dying's the right word, or they're going to lose themselves, which I guess in many ways is the worst form of dying, when you're losing what makes you who you are, your unique personality.
Yeah, and like in the Ant-Man movie, whenever Paul Rudd or Ant-Man is like, the first thing we should do is call the Avengers. It's like, it makes sense that they would call for outside help, even if you don't show it or something, just to make a nod that it is happening. Yeah, it reminds people that it's in a larger universe. It makes sense. It actually, Batman's got a cool bat computer. It shows that they're really trying everything that they could, instead of just keeping it too confined to Batman's materials or his universe.
The skateboard sequence with Alfred was absolutely hysterical again here, where he's carrying the skateboard and chastising him for riding it in the house. But again, it's framed with this whole sense of, again, danger, because he's like, dude, I might even remember how to do this very, very soon. I might not remember pizza. I might not remember all these things that, I love. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Now, the thing I love about that is, in the way that a teenager would, they're using the situation to crowbar in, dude, give me back my skateboard. I want to play. And who doesn't want? And I say that about teenagers. Adults do it too.
And he's laying the guilt trip. Would you rob me of my simple pleasures? Yes, I certainly will. Alfred is just, again, Alfred's dealt with the teenagers. He knows what he's doing. I love just that whole sequence. And it was funny moments, but then serious moments and fun. It kept going back and forth. And again, showing the emotional spectrum on the turtle face is awesome. That, I can understand you could figure out how to draw a person's face showing you different things, but doing it on a turtle face, and you can very clearly see what everyone's thinking. You can get the emotional spectrum. You can get the exactual anger, rage, happy, sadness, the full spectrum from this. And I'm like, throughout these couple pages, you go through all the emotions within bam, 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 through the different characters.
I loved the fact that the pizza sequence where the Batman was actually having the piece of pizza, because you see that so rarely with Batman. But these guys have become comrades at arms. I didn't mean to cut either of you guys off by this one, but I was looking at that and I was just smiling, because you see the smile on Batman's face, and I like the rarity of that happening with Batman, because I think when it does, it means more. And you look at what led to that moment, and it really is, he knows these guys are in trouble. He cares about that. It matters to him. And in that moment, he's like, all right, I'm going to have a piece of pizza with these guys. It's important to them. These are comrades at arms. I relate to who they are. And that moment meant so much because of what led to it. Not the moment isolated itself. It's what led to it. It makes it this moment where it's kind of like, man, that's cool.
I think it's important to have, it's like when somebody, to get the strongest punch, like if you're punching a punching bag, you don't just keep you have to move your fist away from the target. And so for a moment, you're actually moving away from the event that you want. You're setting it up. Meaning, if your goal is to strike the punching bag, you have to temporarily move away from the punching bag to get a better result when you do strike it. So in this situation, I'm talking about, emotionally, it's interesting to have those sort of lighter moments, and it makes the more important or dire situations that happen later more dire in contrast. It's not just all one emotional beat. It's good to have a variety of those.
This was the perfect time for Raphael to show up, because you've had this kind of cool training sequence. You got to see the different emotions of the other turtles. They have this like calm moment, and he walks in and kind of bursts up the whole moment, and really brings us back to the reality that, listen, enough, you guys. This is dire. Why we don't have time to be sitting around from this. Any minute now, this could all come crashing down around us. You have to do that, and he resents Batman for it because he thinks he knows who Batman is. And a lot of that is his anger and frustration over what's going on with him has made him so rash. But there's also that natural nature of some people just have a harder time trusting people or taking them. I was almost going to say taking them at face value, but to his point, it's kind of hard to take a guy who runs around in a bat suit at face value. And I love that there's a reality to what he's saying. Like as a fan of Batman, I'm like, he's right. I mean, there's points he's making here as an outsider that are very true of somebody else who would see Batman meeting him for the first time, perhaps in those fashions. And I really loved that everything he was saying made sense to me based on his personality. The sequence really plays out well and was given, talking about pacing, because you mentioned that earlier, Freddie, and I really think that that's something that I love so much about the way that these issues are framed. It's the time that's given for strong character development mixed in with great action and drama that really made this stand out for me. And this sequence with Raphael in particular really made so much more of where the rest of this issue goes interesting and exciting for me.
Yeah, and he's correct. He's just he's being a little bit jerky about it. It's completely reasonable. I mean, I would understand where he's coming from, or I do understand where he's coming from in that situation. And yeah, it leads to it leads to, I think, visually and emotionally probably the most powerful emotional scene, I think, probably definitely in the issue, but probably throughout the series. Like the strongest emotional interaction, maybe especially between Batman and a turtle, but specifically Raphael here.
I like the reaction of the other turtles as well, as you see them in that sequence, because you got Batman who's kind of taken aback by the whole thing, but you see them kind of, I guess, it's a scolding to them. It's also a crashing reality of what they've already known, but some of them are dealing with, we mentioned the skateboarding, the escaping, the sparring to escape, everything that they're doing, pizza being brought in. They're all doing things to deal with this in their own way. When that comes in, it's like the proverbial giant slap to everybody in the room, including Splinter, who's kind of sitting there trying to, figure out where they go from here at this point. The walkout with everyone in the background, the power in that moment. There's no movement there. I mean, for us, that's a flat panel, but the power. I felt like he was ready to punch through the page, and his hands are not facing in that fashion. It was more of the presence. There's a presence in his walkout there that I thought was just really stunning and showed strength. There's a strength to him that I really admired in how his whole artwork was that set him apart from those in the background. The foreground was very strong. The background was whoa, and I liked the distinction in that moment. And there's power there.
Thanks. That's definitely the desired result. A white background usually means kind of a starkness or an emotional void. It's supposed to feel like if you could hear sound or something, it would be when the sort of background score drops out, and then it makes you feel uneasy because of it. That's kind of what you're trying to do visually, though.
Let's just jump to it. What this leads to. Because I think, as you said, that was a powerful sequence with Raph eventually going to Crime Alley. But even just leading up to it, I love when you do the rain effect, because that's what we've seen you do this a bunch of times. And I love how just that it's showing on him and he's walking in the rain and you can feel it as Bruce is pulling up in the mobile and getting ready to take him to Crime Alley. It was some really cool just lead up to that moment. And it was funny because I figured that was what was going to happen. The way this was laying out and just how it was just Bruce in the car. I'm like, he's taking him to Crime Alley. But the fact that I was thinking that didn't take anything away from the power of the moment, just because of how the scenes where it looked where he shows up and then the scene of them in Crime Alley when he's showing him what happened and telling him and explaining the story. And it was just, those were some very powerful moments that this story really created.
Yeah, and it was written in the book in the script that it would be raining throughout the whole issue. That creates a good emotional backdrop. Aside from that, it's kind of like being handed like a heavyweight sort of scene you really want to invest a lot in. I've learned artistically some different techniques to display rain and that sort of thing. One of the first times I really explored that was actually on a Robin commission that I did at one of the Comic Geek Speak conventions that I went to. I just thought of that just because that's what I'm building on technique wise. But usually you just do like sort of streaks and spatter and stuff. But this was like one of the first times I tried to get into like how the rain would actually roll down the different surfaces, so that it wasn't just it would almost be like the difference between if you were shooting a scene in a movie, you just had a rain effect in between the camera and the actors, but no rain was actually touching the actors. Like it wouldn't affect like their hair, or you wouldn't see any actual liquid dripping off of their coat or their shoulder or something like that. And so I tried to get into and explore that, where I'm actually drawing individual droplets of rain or something running down the sides of, Batman's face or Raphael's face or something. But it was, visually very fun. Also, you have to kind of change your composition so that the busyness of the rain doesn't interfere with anything that's happening. So, for example, if you have something if you don't make your shapes very clear on which way somebody's pointing or something with their finger, if you have it's hard to describe, but somebody pointing with their finger, if there's something directly behind it, like a dark shape behind their dark finger, it can obscure sort of the shape of their hand. And the same type of thing can happen with rain effects or whatever. I'm just giving some background what I was thinking in my mind. So it's actually better to go with some relatively simple compositions whenever you're doing an effect like that. That way you don't make it busy on the storytelling level and the rendering level and the rain level, because it could become too much for the reader to process at once.
Is rain one of those things where it's like, rain? Why did it have to be rain when you're an artist? Or is it, when effects like that, because I'm looking at what that adds to the sequence, and it adds an emotion, it adds a sense of atmosphere and mood for us as readers. On the artistic end, what is that like for you? Because I absolutely loved the use of it and how it played out, but I'm looking at it thinking to myself, man, he drew this. I'm like, what is that like? Am I right in some of my assumptions there? How does that work because you mentioned deadlines and you talk about how structurally that looks like for you. When those effects are in there, what does that do? Because it paid off so well and it was so well worth whatever it took for you to do that.
I need to take a step back here and also say that if you would see the black and whites of all of the Ninja Turtle, all the pages, but every occurrence of a Ninja Turtle, I do this spatter effect to give their skin texture. That is not a digital effect that's added later. That is a traditional effect with a toothbrush and my medium level ink wash. But to do that, you have to, and the same thing with the rain, you have to mask off all the areas that you don't want it to hit, which usually involves me going through reams of Post-it notes. I just take Post-it notes and put it all over the place where I don't want it to go. So for the Ninja Turtles, for their skin texture, you put Post-it notes all over anything that's not a Ninja Turtle, which is a lot of Post-it notes, and you have to rip them up very small to get in the little cracks and crevices. Same sort of thing with the rain. What it means really is it's really fun the first time you do it, and then there's other times you have to do it and keep doing it and keep doing it. So with the rain, it only appears on 5 or 6 pages or something like that, and it's not that bad. I had to keep, like I was alluding to earlier, you keep it in mind with your storytelling so that you don't get too complex with your compositions. So for example, you wouldn't want to do a lot of really extreme camera angles, because if you do, there's sort of hidden perspective lines for the sides of the buildings and stuff. And then if you have the rain following the same perspective lines, it becomes confusing. Or if you have it going contrary to the same perspective line, so you have it slightly different perspective, it can be confusing with the perspective rules. There's just some weird, you just have to it's an angle that exists in the artwork. If you do something at a very similar but not the same angle, it can kind of look competing and odd. It can start to warp sort of your perception of the side of a building. It's hard to describe. I think I've been saying that a lot, but it's because it's not visual. I can't show you an example of what I'm talking about. It's just something you have to keep in mind ahead of time and make sure you keep it in mind from the inception of the scene instead of just something you add to at the last minute, because it affects things starting way back at the composition level. And on a side note, the skin texture, of course, takes up a lot more time. There's so many occurrences of the Ninja Turtles, and you want to do that everywhere. And you don't want that same spatter in the background, or else it flattens out their skin texture. It kind of defeats the purpose of doing it. So the first couple covers I did, which were the covers for 1 and 2, I thought I was being pretty clever doing that little spatter effect, because it's an effect I haven't seen very often. Or if I see it, people do it mechanically, meaning they add it manually with individual dots with a pencil or a gray tone marker or whatever it is. And it kind of looks a little repetitious. It doesn't look as random or sporadic or natural. So me doing it on those covers, it felt really cool. And then whenever I started getting into the sequentials, I thought, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? And then not long ago, whenever I was wrapping up issue 5, I was talking to Kiki about it. I was lamenting, late night one night. We're both up together real late. She's filling in shadows and stuff like blacks for me that I've X'd out. And then I'm over working on a different page, and I wasn't actually considering stopping doing the texture, but I said, I thought I was being pretty clever working on those covers, and then now we have this. And she said, well, just make sure you keep it up. I know it's a pain, but it looks really good.
Would be remiss if I didn't geek out about this because, as I've mentioned, and it's no secret, huge Batman fan, there's iconic sequences. You mentioned earlier about, sometimes rebooting things or redoing things, and there's times where that needs to be done, where you need to revisit something from a different, you mentioned different angles kind of earlier and how that works. I love seeing artists take iconic moments in Batman history and use them in a way to show, we know this moment is pivotal to Batman's life. Here's what it's like emotionally. And we're seeing it through Raphael's eyes as Batman's telling the story, and Batman's eyes as Batman's thinking through it. That Crime Alley panel, when you see that all the way through, one of the things that I really loved about it is, first of all, the visual of the two kind of imagining what was being discussed.
Yeah.
But then also how that panel frames into Batman, the close-up of him at that moment, the way that the light is kind of cutting through Batman's cowl, and you can kind of see his neck kind of almost in the background of it. It gave me the sense like this was coming out of Batman's mind, and I really loved the visual presence of that and the power in that moment, because it's something that I've seen so many times done so well. You rarely see that kind of process. And I'm like, oh man, does that look cool? It just took me there right away. I'm like, I'm in Batman's head right now. It got very heady in that panel, and I really loved, I imagine that took quite a while to do, and I just loved every minute of that because it paid off so well for me.
It's a way to try to explain, if anyone were to be curious, it's a way to hopefully make clear to the reader, kind of in a subtle way, that it's not like they're seeing a hologram. That would be the opposite of what I want them to see. And so one of the ways to do that is to try to use symbology. And here it's, literally it's part of his head, or coming out of, kind of the side of his head. So it represents an imagining or something like that. Symbolically, it's within him that what you're seeing. So I'm glad it came through. That's sort of the hope or the goal. We don't have, sort of like dissolves, or like if I had another 2 or 3 pages to devote to that, I could have used a couple of panels where it was the exact same angle and it had the same background, but one of them had an overlay of the seminal moment, and then you cut back and forth and maybe show Batman kind of shake his head, like shaking away the image from his eyes. I always say time as if it's a movie or something, but I mean space in the comic, the amount of pages that you have or something. But this is a way to try to do that in a shorthand manner.
Well, I actually, when the scene's done right, which it is here, by the way, it is actually a physical. We can see this and we can feel this, and it does come to life for me. And so I'm getting what you're saying about how kind of like he's sitting there and shaking his head. And when I'm reading this, a lot of times when I read Batman, I'll hear the Batman voice. Well, with this sequence, I'm not hearing that voice. I'm hearing more of that calmer voice that he gives with Alfred, or the voice that he'll sometimes give to Gordon, where it's more of a human voice because he's explaining this and he's breaking it down. Especially that one part where he's like, I was 8 years old. That right there to me was just a great, just emotional moment. And it really, again, I knew he was going to Crime Alley, but knowing that he was going there didn't take anything away from just the power of the sequence and what I was getting out of this.
Yeah, he's exposing he's exposing himself emotionally and showing the soft underbelly, the vulnerable side. Raph, that does all the convincing in the world to Raphael, because it makes clear his Batman's motivations. But in addition to that, the Ninja Turtles aren't human, but they have human psychologies, and so it humanizes Batman and his motivations. So, and it totally makes it clear, this is about family. Raphael, you're about family, that we're experiencing. Our loyalties are to the same theme.
One of the things I loved about this sequence is when you mentioned the vulnerability. I think it is something that Batman and Superman have in common. They use their human side in those moments. And you see it more rarely with Batman because of the nature of who he is. Superman does this with, like, when he's not the dun-dun-dun in the sky, kind of thing. When he comes down to Earth and he has those one-on-one conversations, you see a Superman who gets down to street level, really talks to you as if you're an equal, you're a person, shares some of his vulnerability, some of his life growing up and things like that and what that means, and you have that connection there. Batman's doing the same thing here. He recognizes that, like, I can't approach him the same way that I do the other turtles. He needs to see that the truth of the matter is there's some point to what he's saying. And yeah, there is a selfish portion to what I do, but there's parts that he doesn't understand. He's not seeing the whole picture. And it's really important if we're going to accomplish our goal here that he does, because I need him on board. He needs to be on board of the team. And that is something that's a leadership style that's similar in both, that I really like about the two of them, is that they know when to bring that down, to bring people on board. And you can't do it all the time. Batman obviously does it because of his nature of being more standoffish, does it less. But it is something I like about those characters when they do it, because they're such icons. And you don't expect them to be eye to eye with people. Mm-hmm. And when they do it, it's much more powerful, because you're like, wow, they're doing something that's kind of outside of who people see them as, because everyone looks up to them. It's when they come down to our eye level, you care about the characters more when they do that in those moments. And I think it is an effective way to bring people on board the team. It really worked well in this game. I love these moments.
Great. Yeah, I think that's what James was going for sure.
I want to flip back a little bit, because we'd be kind of remiss if we don't jump back and start taking a look at Shredder and Ra's al Ghul and the plans that are going on behind the scenes. Because the machine gets activated and we see Casey Jones. And I guess I got so caught up in the characters that we'd already seen. This surprised me. And I don't know why I did it. When it was like, I'm like, oh, yes, awesome. It made so much sense. I wasn't thinking this only because of the fact, the way that they were describing the sequence, I figured, there's going to be some other evil brought on through and that type of thing. Like, man, Casey Jones right here and now. Yes, awesome. High five. And how that worked out. I really loved the play out of that. I don't know, Jim, maybe you saw it coming in a way that I didn't in that moment. I did not see that. And I loved the way that played out, because of the fact that we have the great team up going on of Ra's al Ghul and Shredder in a way that made sense there.
Well, this team up, I'm glad that you're saying, because with these two coming together, one, when we first get Ra's al Ghul, I absolutely loved how that it was because it was the end of last issue where we have that first face-to-face confrontation between the two of them. Again, that was another just beautiful artwork where on the one side you kind of had the half faces staring at each other, but then you also had the full image kind of, it was an overlay on top of each other. And again, you get beautiful detail, you get some really cool intensity going through them, but it was a neat kind of just moment, because one, this is Ra's al Ghul, but we're seeing Shredder's not an idiot. Shredder knows what he's doing. I really like the fact that we are seeing his strategery here, where he's laying out the trap for Casey, where Casey's been bouncing back and forth between the two worlds, and he was waiting for the moment, okay, I know who this is, I'm going to pull him through right now, boom, and we're going to take him. I thought that, for me, was a really cool moments of, one, visually, story-wise, and like you, I was, hooping and hollering when he came through, because that was just a really cool, just bam entrance.
Yeah, that is quite an entrance for Casey there. It almost reminds me of in Lord of the Rings, the Return of the King, where there's a couple of goblins at the top of that tower, and they see Samwise shadow and the shadow looks so big that they start to cower, and then when they see him, they're like, oh. But there's something about that sort of that entrance that makes you think, what is Casey gonna just beat down Roz and Shredder? That's because he makes such a big entrance, And then at the end of the issue, you see that things didn't go as well for him. he came there with a lot of intent, He was ready to to kick some butt to save his friends, and he did his best, but.
He also didn't know exactly what he was walking into.
No.
He had that I'm here to chew bubble gum and kick some butt, and I'm all out of bubble gum kind of mindset there. And it's funny because I always see Casey having that mindset. Anytime I've ever read or seen a story about him, he always has that kind of mindset. And then sometimes it works out for him, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's ferociously loyal. I mean, he's going through a lot of effort there to try to save his friends. It shows more in the next couple of issues, even after that. So,
Jim, you mentioned the intelligence of Shredder. I kind of want to go back to that just for a second, because what I really loved in the sequence with Raish and Raz and Shredder, I always flip-flop between the two because it was Raz for me for years, but now I heard that it's Raish. But it depends on what medium you're hearing it in, because it's used both ways. One of the things that I really liked about the interactions with both characters there was, if you look back at the Penguin sequence, when the Penguin was encountered with Shredder recognized Penguin for what he was. And his relationship with Raz is so much different than it was with Penguin. There's times where interactions with villains from a different world make you respect the other villain even more. I learned a lot about Shredder in this, where I'm like, wow, Shredder really, as again, another martial artist, is able to read the people that he's dealing with and react accordingly with those particular people and seeing value, and also how to handle them.
Yeah, this is more of the IDW version of Shredder, who is much more calculating and cold and ruthless. That's more of the character of the IDW version of Shredder, which is, I think, beneficial to Shredder. And if people have not read the IDW series of the Shredder and mainly know from the old 80s cartoon, no Shredder there. He seems kind of foolish and a little dopey and that sort of thing, but he's very formidable, cold, and scary in the IDW series, and James has done a really good job of bringing that character through. And actually my favorite scene of Shredder, I mean, there's a lot of great moments that James has written, but my favorite scene of Shredder is in issue 2, where he's at the docks with the Penguin, and the way that James has written him. So Shredder's character, even him, the full page splash with limited space, you have to really pick your splashes, meaning the pages with no other panels, just one big panel, one big image. You have to pick those very carefully, and I think that's a great moment where he's basically, the only line on the page is he's walking towards the mercenaries. He's surrounded by the Foot Clan that's coming to his aid, and he says, "I don't care." What he's referring to is basically he's just blatantly double-crossed Penguin and these mercenaries who deliver this piece of high-tech machinery. And, the mercenaries think that they're tough guys, and so they say something like, I can't remember the exact dialogue, but it's basically a threat. He says, "I don't have the money for you," and they're starting to threaten him because they have weapons, and he's like, I don't care. But there's something about that just seems so cool to me. I know it's a very simple moment, but that was one of my favorite pages to draw of the whole series, actually, so far. Very simple, but seems to go right to the core of Shredder's character.
One of the things we'd be remiss if we ignored was the fact that he's driving the Turtles are driving the Batmobile, and it's a very iconic version of the Batmobile as we're going through. I was at a Wizard Con, the Wizard World Cleveland last week. There's the 66 model kits that a lot of enthusiasts are creating, and I was sitting here, I'm like, how could I drive this out of here? Because, I grew up loving that car, and that was the one, as a kid, you kind of geeked out, like, I want to sit in that, I want to drive it. And it's neat to see that so frequently at cons now. But I was, sitting here, I was so connecting with that when I saw it. I'm like, no, I get why they did that. I would do that. I would be hard pressed to, the keys are in there. I can really take this, and he's not in here right now. Why wouldn't I do this? It was so great to see how that all played out. There was the fun factor in this. One of the things I really been loving about these issues so far, I love the balance of fun in a serious story. Yeah. Because I think too often fun is forgotten as an important part of storytelling. It doesn't diminish from the serious nature of this. It doesn't diminish from the action. It isn't slapstick. It's just more of, these are fun characters, and they're going through a serious circumstance, but I never want to lose the fact that that's what's endearing about them, is that these are fun guys. I want to hang with the Turtles because they're fun. And in that moment, I'm like, oh, even when they're looking at the front, oh man, Batman's gonna kill me. I love that. I loved how that played out. It just added so much to that sequence. And there are moments that needed to happen because it's what makes this series special. And you mentioned earlier that this is doing quite well. I'm thrilled to hear that because it has been so great. And it's moments like that aren't wasted. You don't lose the fun factor of all this in the serious nature of what's happening. I really love it.
I think that's one of the larger contributing factors is of the success of the book. First of all, I'm super happy and lucky to be a part of the series. I just wanted to point that out, but it's one of the big success components is how well James is writing the characters and, like I said, making room for the character moments. But if you went completely serious, it's not out of the question. I mean, there has been completely serious stories in the Ninja Turtles lore or lexicon for, off and on forever. But and the same thing with going totally, goofball as well. Those have also existed in the Ninja Turtles history as well. But I think it's best when you have that nice balance, because then you get the like I was describing before, like a really impactful punch, because you move away from the goofiness, and so when you do hit something that's happy or fun, it gives you a big smile on your face. Or if you move away from the seriousness to the more smiley stuff, then whenever you get to the darkest stuff, it feels really extra dark in comparison. So I think James is I've been very impressed by the way he has seemingly effortlessly gotten into the minds of these characters. Now, he's been a big fan of these characters for years as well. It's one of the reasons he was chosen is, he does a great job with the characterization of Batman already. He's writing other Batman stuff as well, but he was a big fan of the Ninja Turtle stuff, and so he fit right into the characters. So, yeah, good choice, to bring him on.
Absolutely. I mean, it just totally worked there. I loved how they went right away to Casey, and then we get to find out this was what Casey was doing. Casey was recognizing the need to bring them over the canisters so that way they would survive and be able to do that. And I really liked that, it's the friend kind of going out of his way to this dangerous mission. That really, sometimes there's that need where you're like looking at, Casey Jones, one of the great things about him, he will risk himself in situations where there are overwhelming odds. And he had no idea exactly how overwhelming it was going to be. But he came over and still did that. And that added something to the sense of danger again to the Turtles, because now they've got this mutagen here and they're going to Arkham. So you're going to take the baddest of the bad in the DC universe, these iconic characters that we know that are locked up in Arkham, and you're taking the mutagen in there? I totally was geeking out at the end of this issue. Episodic, you mentioned that earlier, and I love the episodic nature of this because that's one of the great things about comics, right? It's the cliffhangers at the end. The pace of getting to a good cliffhanger. Sometimes a cliffhanger's dropped on and if you didn't have that satisfying story building to the cliffhanger, it doesn't have as much impact. When you've got this building to it and the excitement that builds to this cliffhanger, and you see these two just looking up at Arkham Asylum, I so can't wait for the next issue. And that stuff is really what brings me back to comics every month. It's the excitement of what's coming next. What are you going to do now? Because this has been so good already, and yet now we're kicking it up again?
Unfortunately, you're going to be disappointed. They find out that the canisters only hold like lime-flavored Jell-O, and no, it's a real disappointment.
Spoiler.
Yeah.
Do they at least get to enjoy it?
Yeah, but it's delicious. So that's the twist.
Well, and see, that brings back the fun.
It's the big reveal on the splash of issue 5 is that Shredder loves lime Jell-O, so he has at it.
Is that what causes the rift then between Ra's al Ghul and Shredder? The fact that it's like Ra's wants to do something and Shredder's just eating Jell-O?
He's like the Jell-O from my home universe tastes a lot better than your Jell-O. I've lost all motivation to do anything cool. I'm just going to sit here and eat this. Sorry,
guys. There's room for Jell-O, so
yeah, there is. That's why we worked it in. It's 20 pages of Jell-O.
I love your Ra's al Ghul because talk about an iconic character. I mean, this is a character that spun out of Neil Adams, right? I mean, so you look at that artwork and think of that character. This is the this is the Batman that wasn't wearing the shirt and was all buff, and they did the sword fight and the classic iconic part of that. To me, what I love about Ra's al Ghul is the presence. And we've talked a lot in this episode about presence of characters. You nailed, like, in that sequence where he's looking up, there's everything that I love about Ra's al Ghul. I love seeing artists who really get the character and understand what's important about him. This is a guy that, we watched the Leonardo and Batman sparring and how cool that martial arts sequence looked. Ra's al Ghul and Batman, their sword fighting, that iconic sequence of events, is to me one of the things that I really love about Batman is when you see his combat sequences. One of the reasons why I still go there to this day. I love the Leonardo Batman sequence because of events like that. So to see this guy here now and to see the presence that you've given him in your artistic take on him, I really, really love the way that you do his brow, the sense that he looks really intelligent, but yet formidable. He's got that build that, makes it look like he does seem like something from another time, because of the fact that he's this immortal guy that's been around forever. And I just really love your take on him. And I would be remiss if we didn't mention that, because you've done so many iconic characters in this from both universes. Ra's al Ghul is one of my favorites when he's done right, and he is so done right here. Really, really nice job on.
Cool. And dude, I'm so lucky to get to draw all these iconic characters. It's surreal. Just earlier today, like the stuff I'm drawing in issue 6, it's like it dawned on me, because like part of the situation that I'm in right now is like to hit the deadline for this, and there's so much that's going on. And like I said, sometimes I'm working between 15 and 18 hours a day or something. Sometimes you get, pretty tired and you're kind of detached, mentally. You're executing things. You know exactly what you need to be doing and stuff, but you've zoned in so far that you've lost perspective. It's the forest for the trees, whatever that saying is. Occasionally your awareness or consciousness kind of zooms out from that, and like it did to me earlier today, and there's like a realization of what it is that you're really doing. It's like, this is just so super awesome. Like that all the characters I'm getting to draw, the sort of interactions, it's like it's a fanboy dream come true. It really is. So I'm glad that the characterization of him works, and it's how I see him, and it's the same thing with the Joker. It's like you have to get into their mind and stuff like that, and it's great to get to contribute to that. I was actually, when it happened today, whenever my consciousness kind of zoomed out, we had the windows open in the studio, but then it started to rain, so I was closing everything, and for some reason while I was staring out the window at like the puddles of water or something, it just popped like kind of into my mind, and it's like getting the chance to contribute to the legacy of these characters. Now, I don't, it's not like, I don't think that when the Turtles get back into the IDW series or whatever, like, I don't think they're going to say, and remember that time we hung out with Batman? I don't necessarily think that they'll be saying that kind of stuff, because there might be like a rights thing after the whatever, all legal stuff. But the point is that I'm lucky enough to get to contribute to the legacy of two of the coolest and most popular intellectual properties on the planet. And so one of the many benefits of that is getting to draw the iconic rogues gallery, and hope that you hit the sort of, you don't want to duplicate what other people have done, but you want to make sure that you're channeling some of that, that you're getting some of the essence of what makes that cool, and then vibing off of that and doing something similar but in your own way.
This has been what I've been like chomping at the bit to talk about on the show, the series in general, because we had originally planned to do this back in December, and unfortunately, my personal life, some things hit, which I've talked about on the show. And I don't mean this as a downer, actually. It's just the opposite. It's what I love about comics. I'll just say it. My father passed away in December. This came out, and I've been really enjoying this series all the way through. And it's one of the things that comics are for us as fans. It's an escape. It's an opportunity to kind of delve into something really enjoyable that captivates us and takes us someplace else in those moments. I was sharing as we got started in this, I've a busy couple of weeks at work and what's going on, and I was really trying to pin down a time with you to get this in and make this happen, and I'm so thrilled that we had an opportunity to do this tonight to talk about this series. This is what comics do, and I know it does it for Jim. When you have things going on in your life, and that's everybody listening to this, to be able to take a comic and read it, and in that moment just get absorbed and pulled pulled into the world. Think about what's going on off page, in between panels and stuff like that. Have those fun moments. Go on the journey with the characters when things get serious and sad and the action kicks up and you're just taken to so many different places in what seems to, as a very compressed time frame of, 20 pages, but then so much depth is going on with all that. I really appreciate the timing of this series for myself personally, and how much I really have been enjoying the ride, because the ride came at a time where I really needed a good ride to go on.
That's
and
great.
This has been incredible.
That's great. Yeah, that's with no sarcasm or patronizing tone or anything like that. I'm glad that it's doing that for you and at the right time and stuff like that. And I've known you guys and we've had podcast recordings when we did the Richard Donner Superman thing. I had just come from my mother, not on her deathbed quite yet, but she passed away not long after that. And, it was, it's like these different, it's kind of the same thing. For me, it's not so, it's a similar theme, although for me, it's like I'm losing myself in the creation of this other world. So I'm not really experiencing the current world I'm really in, but it's a sort of similar sort of idea.
I love that about this, though. It's really what the creative medium and being able to be a part of it, whatever side you're on it. It's one of the neat things about this is just emotionally what it takes you. It's the reason why you look at this as escapist fiction. It is that opportunity it makes your life better. I honestly find that I'm a better person and I'm better at the things that I do, or better at dealing with the things that are going on in my life when you have that opportunity to just kind of, in this moment, I'm here, and I'm into what's going on with Batman and Turtles and Shredder and Raish and Penguin and everybody else, Joker, in those sequences. They give you that break to kind of regroup, get yourself gathered back together and things like that. And that's something that only a really great art form can do that. And that's one of the, why do I still read comics at this age of my life? It's because of the fact that there's so much quality in what's being produced here. No other medium does this quite the way comics does. And I really have been enjoying this journey. I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to finally start talking about this, because it really has been one that's been hard not to talk about on the show. And I didn't know when we were going to be able to sneak this in. So I've been holding back on all the issues to talk about it till now. And I'm so glad to be able to finally have this opportunity.
Wow. Yeah. Great compliment. And that's very much what the best comic books do that for me as well. And it's very fortunate to get to immerse myself in that for a living. And the best case scenario, which this series is the best case scenario really for me, it makes all the really long hours pay off in ways that the art form is something that I'm always pursuing, and that's like a lifelong interest and stuff. But it's not often that it's in with this subject matter and that sort of thing. It makes a big difference. It really does impact my life, and hoping that it impacts other people's lives. And I've gotten a lot of emails and tweets and Facebooks about how fun and cool that this is, and people who haven't read comics. And there was a guy who recently tweeted me, this really was complimentary, that he hadn't read comics in 20 years, and this was the first series that he had picked up in that time. Like, it made him come back to comics, so to speak, and then he was going to attend his first convention ever coming up this May or something. It's like, that's pretty heavy stuff, and I'm really happy to be a part of that, to be contributing to it.
Jim, is there anything else that you wanted to say about Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that we haven't had a chance to get to?
Or songs you wanted to sing?
Yeah.
Well, hold on. I do have Ninja Rap by Vanilla Ice right in front of me. If you want, I can bust it out.
Wait.
Ninja,
Hold on.
Rap, ninja, rap. Go turtle, go turtle, go turtle, go.
Oh no!
I could,
go
into
go
it.
Ninja.
Wait, you said you have that right in front of you. Please explain.
Do you have the actual soundtrack in front of you?
I do not have the actual soundtrack in front of me.
What is exactly in front of you?
I've got, actually, I just pulled up Ninja Rap by Vanilla Ice.
Oh, okay.
It's on your wall.
Go Turtle, go.
It says go Ninja, go. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Oh,
you are
okay.
correct. I was wrong.
Okay,
Yeah, I was going for my own memory on that one.
I don't know what kind of overlap this is what I'm about to say is going to have, but like about a year and a half ago, I was on a Red Letter Media Best of the Worst episode, and this was before Red Letter Media is like one of my favorite YouTubers, and I'm kind of pals with them. Like I'm it's not like we're friends that hang out all the time, but I've hung out with them a couple times. During that episode, we were one of the videos that we. First of all, have you guys seen this? Do you know what I'm referring to? Do you know what I'm talking about here?
No. So I'm interested.
Okay, all right. So anyway, but there's a part in there where one of the videos that we review is like how to become a teenage ninja, and it was like this old 80s video, like a direct-to-video thing, very cheaply made, but the sort of like font tried to look like the Ninja Turtles, and so we were talking about that, and then Rich Evans, who's one of the funny personalities on the show, he and I, he's a comic book guy as well, and he is also a Ninja Turtles fan. We were joking about some of the we were talking about the background, the history that Eastman and Laird had both took a lot of inspiration from Frank Miller, and then as a joke, I don't even remember who said this on the show, but somebody on the show said something you didn't know was that Frank Miller wrote the lyrics to the song, like the ninja song in the first Ninja Turtles movie or something, and I had made the joke that people should change his Wikipedia page to reflect that, and apparently a bunch of people were doing that. Like even think about it. I was just trying to be funny, that because I don't actually think that people should do that on Wikipedia. Anyway, it just popped into my mind, kind of like as a weird parallel that you were singing the ninja rap, and somebody had said that Frank Miller on this show had written the lyrics to it. Whatever, I'm rambling.
That's funny.
If you care to see it, I recommend this is not. I get no benefit from this. I recommend anyone listening to this check out Red Letter Media. They also created the 70-minute long like Plinkett reviews of the Star Wars prequels and stuff. They're a funny bunch of guys. If you like, they're good natured in a lot of their criticisms and stuff like that of movies. They're pretty funny.
There'll be links in our show notes, so anybody that's interested, please check out the show notes and you can check this out.
Oh yeah. At the end of the first Ninja Turtles movie, which the first Ninja Turtles movie is really good. I mean, it holds up pretty good until you get. If you think too much about like the teenagers and the Foot Clan, that's a little weird. But anyway, at the very end, there's like a song that's a kind of a sort of rap song. They say that Raphael's the leader of the group. I don't know if you remember this or if you were into this movie enough to have listened to the lyrics, but it's going through the list of the characters or of the turtles, and then it gets to Raphael and it says that he's the leader of the group, and it's so weird to me that they would have made that mistake and then left it in the movie. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah. It's I didn't remember it until you said it, being 100% honest, but now I do, because I did the movies. I watched the original ones back in the day quite a bit, because that was a fun era. Wow, I want to go back and watch them again, because I've obviously seen the most recent movie, but I haven't gone back and watched the older ones in quite some time. I'd actually like to jump back and see them again.
Yeah, I wouldn't dare watch the third one. Don't do that to yourself. But the first one is, of course, the best, and then the second one's still pretty good. And then if you want to watch more, I would jump ahead to the 2007 3D animated Ninja Turtles. That's still pretty good. But the third one, which is the one where they go back in time into feudal Japan, it's not a good movie. I'll just that's a pretty common knowledge, but just for anyone who was wondering, I wouldn't do that to you if you have the choice, unless you just really want to see it anyway.
Jim actually said he wanted to, and we're going to be doing it in an upcoming episode. So
here's the thing with the third one.
Oh my gosh, really?
Hold on,
I was kidding.
There's some stuff I'm going to defend on the third movie.
Oh, no.
Because I did like when they went back in time and the people were kind of accepting them and they weren't hiding in the sewers, and it was Raph who actually liked the fact that he didn't have to hide in the sewers. He was in plain sight, and these people weren't calling him a monster and a freak. He was their champion and their hero, and I thought that was a cool kind of side story that they were going with it. Now, there was a lot of goofiness that they were playing out with the time traveling of taking the feudal people into present day, and Casey dealing with them, and then that kind of lost me a little bit, but I did like kind of some of the themes of when the Turtles were actually in feudal Japan. I thought that was kind of a neat little story.
So to paraphrase, you're saying, in spite of some otherwise not so good a film, that's at least a theme that you like.
There was some good stuff with it. It wasn't. I will agree. The first one was the best one because that wasn't that set the bar, and that was a really cool story.
Yeah.
Second one, I don't know. When they started introducing the monsters, but they didn't really let the monsters be adults. You know, they were like little babies, and it was like that kind of lost me. They're too cute and cuddly. I wanted more nasty monsters.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So then by the third one, as I said, the feudal Japan stuff was really cool, but the present day stuff was kind of losing it. So I don't know.
And also, I want to bring up, since we're just on the subject of watching Ninja Turtles related stuff, there's a documentary called The Definitive History of the Ninja Turtles. It's called that's the subtitle. The actual title of it is Turtle Power. Now, just to be clear, because it's a little unclear, the name of the company is called Definitive Films. So it is not definitive as in it covers every era of the Ninja Turtles, but it does a very good job of covering how it got started, the early stages of it with Eastman and Laird creating Mirage Studios, and then bringing in additional artists, and after the black and white comic had been successful, and then how it got turned into cartoon and toy line. It goes into all that stuff. I just watched it earlier today. I mean, it's a great documentary. It's very entertaining. It does skim over quite a bit because it could only be like an hour and a half, because I spoke briefly to one of the creators of the documentary, and he said that when it was picked up by Paramount, they gave a very strict hour and a half time frame duration, so they had to cut out a bunch of stuff, and they had like 180 hours or something crazy like that amount of footage that they wanted. Obviously, they weren't going to incorporate it all. I'm just saying they had really extended interviews and subject matter that they just weren't. They had to leave a lot of it out. But anyway, anyone who hasn't seen it, I recommend you see it. If you have seen it, watch it again. It's really good.
I haven't seen that. That'd be great to watch it. I love documentaries.
Dude, you should see it.
Yeah, I'm very into that. So that's a good. I'll put that links to that in the show notes as well, just so people can see what we're talking about there.
And an interesting thing, I've been looking for the Mutant Ninja Turtles rap, the actual lyrics, not the Vanilla Ice version, but the one that was in the movie. And It's funny, they've modified it now because they've changed it. So it's Leonardo is the leader in blue. He does anything it takes to get the ninjas through. Donatello is the fellow, has a way with machines. Raphael's got the most attitude on the team. Michelangelo, he's one of a kind, and you know just where to find him when it's party time. So they did modify it to make to actually say Leonardo is the leader.
Oh wow! So does it make clear on the website that you're reading this from that this is the modified version to correct the problem?
No, this is the anonymous version. So they don't even give credit to anybody who ever wrote it.
Oh, maybe it's a fan version. I mean, because I'm assuming. Okay, it's been a while since I've heard it.
JimSegulin.com.
Yeah, you're the anonymous person who rewrote it.
Do you have bookmarked lyric sites? Is this how on our show music keeps popping up? Is this like a thing that you do, or is this just for this purpose? Have you just been busted?
Well, when you do a parody of a song, you gotta know the original version.
Oh, jeez.
There's a couple of the sites that I like because it's, what I'll do is I'll do some YouTube stuff so I actually can hear it, while I have the lyrics up. So some of the YouTube stuff, they actually have the lyrics running for you. But yeah, I use a couple of different sites. When I go out with my psychosis, I go all out. So.
As opposed to doing like 3-hour shows, that isn't something wrong with us. Freddie, is there anything we didn't get to that you wanted to talk about that we missed? Because I always whenever we have guests on, I always get worried that there's something that maybe we should have touched on or that we didn't hit. Any other songs? No, I mean, they'll be totally serious. Is there anything that we missed that you would have liked to have discussed or shouted out or something like that we didn't get to?
Not that I can think of. I mean, everything that we talked about, I think we pretty thoroughly went over issue 4, and then we alluded to, we bounced back to issues, all the previous issues. I can't think of anything else, really. I think we did a good job of covering it.
As always, I want to thank you. You've been with us for, this is our 10th year anniversary this month, and it was really appropriate that you were on this month to join us, because we've known you for most of it, and you have been on so many times and given us so much of your time and an opportunity to really get to know your career, your philosophies, your interests, everything, in a lens of somebody who you are on my short list of favorite artists that I've enjoyed throughout your career. I'm looking on my wall right now. I've got the signed issue of the Robin story that we talked about years ago. I've got it framed just because it was such a great issue. And I remember that one was one where you sent me some copies. I took them to the guidance counselor at my school so that way she could start using it with students there. And it seems so recent, yet that was so long ago that we did that.
Yeah, but that's weird, isn't it? I mean, it's been, I'm not sure how long. How long had you guys been podcasting before I got on an episode?
Well, you were on our first year. So
okay.
You've been with us. You've been with us over 9 years.
Yeah, that's really weird to think of. I mean, first of all, it's my pleasure, and it's fun to chat with you guys and to catch up every once in a while. And each time, I'm just like, even though, I mean, we were talking about Jonas Quantum not all that long ago, but it was several months ago. And then sometimes there might be a bigger gap in there, but each time it's really fun to talk to you guys, to catch up. On occasion, whenever I see you guys at conventions, it's great to chat with you in person as well. So yeah, it's my pleasure, and I'm happy to be on. Thanks for having me on.
Well, besides the friendship, I really want to, on a personal note, I want to thank you for all the entertainment you've provided over that time. I mean, being able to really enjoy your work, which you pour your blood, sweat, and tears into all this. This is your livelihood. It's your art. It's important to you. There's a passion to what you do. And we get the opportunity to enjoy it. And that's what keeps me coming back to comics. It's one of the reasons why I'm a fan of yours, because your artwork really has always, from day one, it's really how we met you. We were sharing what we love about your art very genuinely. And to be able to have this relationship with you and get to know what leads to that, that's the part that for me is I've grown to really admire is... as a fan, I'm going to read your great art, I'm going to enjoy your great art in these stories that I'm enjoying, no matter what. Being able to have the insight into what it takes to get that to publication has been has only upped my respect for a medium that I've loved all my life. So thank you so much for sharing and continuing to share that with us, because you'll sometimes you'll say, I think I'm rambling here. I'm like, no, I'm captivated by this because I have no clue about any of this, because it's not my world. I'm just the reader who enjoys it. It's really great to get to know that insight, and thank you so much for giving us so much of your time. I think I'm a better fan because I think I understand more about this now and admire more the books that I've already been enjoying.
Wow, thank you. It's tough to get. I mean, that's probably the biggest sort of compliment I could get. So, yeah, thank you. That's very flattering. It's very much my pleasure to be on. And whenever I'm talking sort of like the inside sort of development sort of stuff for comics and stuff, I never know if I'm going to lose somebody, because, there are times whenever I'm at a convention, if I talk about it, there's oftentimes it's an artist and they're really into it. And then there's other times that, people kind of get that glassy-eyed stare. It's like that it's more information than they wanted. So generally, whenever we're on together and we're doing a podcast, oftentimes I don't censor myself as much for time. I just chit-chat with you guys about whatever's occurring to me, because I know we can go long form and that sort of thing. But it's fun. It's not the type of conversations that I have on a daily or weekly basis, so it's fun for me.
Oh man, hey, as always, man, thanks for coming on the show. You know how much we like you, how much we like having you around. You're always welcome back anytime, even if it's just to talk about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles the movie.
Gee Willikers, guys.
The third movie.
Oh, no.
No.
Yes, but it's on Blu-ray. It's so clear.
Oh, no, you don't.
I want to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. We are going to be doing a voicemail catch-up this month, so please do not think we're ignoring your voicemails. We are going to be bringing them back onto the podcast. They will be a part of our 10th anniversary month celebration, so we aren't forgetting about you. Please continue to call in. We want you part of our show. Check out RagingBullets.com, our show website. This is where you're going to find out news on new episodes that are coming up and where the podcast is heading. It does link to Twitter. We do have a Facebook fan page. We have a wonderful Facebook group community, and the community has grown so far beyond the show. It's become their community, really the members of the community that are there. If you're looking for great conversation about comic books, pop culture in general, that's friendly and fun, and a place to shout out things that are going on and with your own projects and different things that you're doing, go to that Facebook group, join up, and be a part of the community. It's I can't thank the people there enough for really just kind of just going well beyond what we do and setting up a community that is really special. I'm proud to be a part of it. We have a Google Plus page. There's really places to find us all through social media. It's because we care about you and we want to keep you in the know on what's going on with the podcast. Jim, sponsoring this episode is DCBService.com, and once again, InStockTrades.com. What is going on over at DCBService.com?
Of course, they continue their support of the Vertigo bundles with 50% off all 12 titles, only $23.88. But we also have Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles issue number 6, 40% off, only $2.39.
Looking once again over at InStockTrades.com, I mentioned earlier the search engine. Legendary Star-Lord. Freddie E. Williams II did work on Legendary Star-Lord. You can find those trade paperbacks also over at InStockTrades.com. It's really the place to go for anything that you're looking for comic-related, whether it's hardcovers, trade paperbacks. If it's a collected edition, InStockTrades.com is your source. Back to DCBService.com for 1 second. I do want to remind everyone they are a digital partner. Whether you shop through Comixology or you do My Digital Comics, make sure to link those accounts. Shop through the portals on DCBService.com. Earn 5% of those purchases towards your DCB service order. Thank both of those companies for continuing to support us into our 10th anniversary. Jim, our next episode, we are going to be joined by another special friend, and more of that will be coming up on our show website. I want to make sure we can pin down the exact dates of that. But our plan is to be talking about Batman and Robin Eternal. We will see everyone then.
Bye!
On November 13th, Sean Whalen was asked to stop constantly talking about comic books. That request came from his wife. Deep down, he knew she was right, but he also knew that someday he would find someone that would talk to him. With nowhere else to go, he appeared at the home of his childhood friend Jim Segulin. Sometime earlier, Segulin's boss had requested that he shut up about his comic books and never speak of them again. Can two grown men put out a DC Comics podcast without driving each other crazy? It's Raging Bullets, the DC Comics fan podcast. With Sean Whalen as Dr. Norge, and Jim Segulin as the Sensei of the Whatnot and the Duke of You-Know. It's a spoiler podcast, so they will go in depth into the plot line, story twists, and whatnot of the comics they are reviewing. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you may better enjoy the show.